Hello and welcome to the Portcullis plugin tutorial. My name's Ollie. I'm going to show you how to download, install and also use this plugin. So we're going to include a link to the plugin page from our YouTube video, but for those who want to know how to find it, you go onto bukkit.org, click plugins, Portecoulissante on the search bar, and there's your page. From here all you have to do is click download once, download again and save the file. Once you're done there, go on Windows Explorer, find your downloads, find the file, Portecoulissante, go to your server folder, find the plugins folder and paste it in there. Once you've done that, you can reload, restart or start your server up and the plugin will work. There's nothing to configure, there are no permissions, and in game there are also no commands, so it's one of the easiest plugins to use. So the Portcullis, it can be made of fence blocks, never brick fence, or iron bars. It can't be made out of fence gate blocks, obviously because redstone powers them and opens them. What you've got to remember when you're building a Portcullis is to include a top when you're building it, so you know, it doesn't go into the sky, and I'll show you what happens later if you don't build a top. To remember that if your portcullis raises by more blocks than the length of the portcullis, the height of it even, sorry, then you'll need to incorporate a second way of powering it, and I'll show you what I mean by that later. So let's just start off. You build the portcullis, it must be 2 by 2, that's the fence size. And if you surround it with blocks and then allow it to raise or fall depending upon where you want it to go, then what you need to do is power the fence block by putting redstone on the block adjacent to the block adjacent to the fence. So 2 blocks away from the fence, so fence, block, redstone. And then you add your input, your input for the portcullis. And there you go. Up, down. Same for the nether brick fence, up, down, and same for the iron bars. Piece of cake. One problem though, you want a person to go through here, there's not enough space. So, we've made this one here, which is one higher, and I can't turn it off. This is the problem I mentioned when if it raises 2 and it's only 2 high, you're going to have this difficulty. That's because the redstone isn't powering the fence any longer and it can't allow it to raise. So there are a couple of possible fixes to this. The easy fix is to just make a fence that's 3 high and raises 2 times. And you put the power up one obviously, and then this fence here can be powered. You can walk through, you can lower it. The second fix is a bit more complicated, but basically you have to power it to lift it and then have a second power around the back, and you can tidy this up or use another plugin like wireless redstone to make it completely hidden, and this one, when it turns off, will allow it to lower, and that will allow it to raise as high as or even more blocks than the height of the portcullis, which can be really useful, and I'll show an example of that later. So what happens if you don't include a top? Well, it will keep raising and eventually it will hit the ceiling of the map, which by default is 256, and then it will rain fences. So we'll come back and see those fences later. Now your portcullis can be wider or higher as long as it's a rectangular shape, and just to show that works, there's a little example. Now one of the things that you can do, which is a nice little addition, is these fence blocks will obviously block water or lava, and you can have fences that lower or raise and sort of make a water trap or waterfall, which it's very simple to do. Now the one problem with lava is that lava doesn't like to disappear, so I would not recommend using lava, as when you raise it there will be just lava hanging around here, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's just grab ourselves a couple of buckets and let's lower it and watch the lava come through. And you'll raise your portcullis and it will just stick around, or it normally does. And it sometimes is alright. Sometimes lava can be a real pain to disappear. As you can see there, it's got stuck. And obviously you can't use a bucket to get rid of that. You have to place blocks and then remove the blocks. But if you're not careful, then the lava can keep going. So you can use lava if you'd like. I genuinely just prefer using water. It's kind of a bit more aesthetically pleasing as well. I like the look of it. So one of the more in-depth things you can do with this is it will read the portcullis in one line, and here I've got a 2 high portcullis, a 3 high portcullis, and a 4 high. And as they're all read in a straight line and identified as separate portcullises, they can sort of be work together, and obviously as long as you power them. However, one thing you can't do is have different heights on the same portcullis. So trying to change that perhaps, or have a gap in it, it must be rectangular, and obviously these two either side will raise and the one in the centre does not. Now, some people do like to shut their fences behind them, and that can be achieved with something called a XOR gate or an XOR gate, as you can see in the chat. These are quite simple to make, but basically when there's no input on, there is no output. Here's the output block. One input on, output. Other input on, there's an output still. However, the funny thing is, if there's 2 inputs on, there is no output. Which means, in the example of your portcullis, both levers are up. You push this lever to raise the portcullis, you go through to the other side of your base, and then push this lever and it will go down again. Now when I use my designs, which I'll show you later, I do use wireless redstone. To make sure that this works, all you do is replace these levers with redstone, put the inputs here, which are the receivers next to the receivers for the transmitters that are by the levers, and here is the transmitter that transmits power to the portcullis. So, I am in my house, and I mentioned earlier that you can use XOR gates for really cool purposes, and you can use raising of fences beyond the normal limit by using some funny wiring to some sort of advantage. And if you look down here, you've got some iron bars, and this is linked to a XOR gate using wireless redstone. And I've got this portcullis that's raising up here. There's these stair blocks here that are going to stop it. Now, what you can do is jump in, and you've got a lift system, and then there's another lever here, and I can just use that to get me back up. As you might notice, the portcullis actually lowers a lot faster than it raises. This is just something that the author preferred to sort of make it more realistic in terms of physics. And lastly, we have a very advanced tutorial, showcase really, and it's on a nuclear rocket type thing that is basically an extension of the lift that my friend, worst name ever, came up with the concept, and I helped to build the rocket and wire it so it would work. And we will just show you our test launch of that rocket. Okay, so this is the rocket. It's got many different portcullises inside of it. There's 2 big ones that are on the side, and then there are many different central ones which allow compartments, which my friend worst name is sat in right now. As you can see, regardless of what the size is, they all move up at the same rate if they're all powered, and that's really useful for a design like this without having to do any very difficult calculations. Now, lastly, if you would like to see this plugin tutorial, when you join our server, you'll land here next to the spawn, and just behind here is a warp to the redstone. You can right click this sign and wait 5 seconds, or type warp redstone, and it will warp you to the plugin tutorial, which will include some for the others. It's quite basic, but it just shows you how it works, and you can sort of have a look around really and see how it's wired. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching. I will be doing next a video on the sister plugin called Retractable Bridge, which is very similar but just uses horizontal movement with half slabs instead.